And boys and assembled company, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And tonight we have a special guest all the way from Romania, and I'm not talking about Yuliu, who's been driving the bus for months from us. I'm talking live and direct. We have Ina Bulzan. Now, Ina, have you got a story for us?
Thank you for your welcome. Yes, I have.
Please, can we hear it?
Yes.
Or maybe two.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
It's up to you. The
Okay.
main thing about these nights is that you enjoy them.
Okay. But I also want to hear a story from you in exchange.
Okay.
Well, thank you again for having me here. I'm just on my journey to become a storyteller, so please excuse any, bubblish and any mistakes I'm making. My story is not specifically about Christmas, but it's about winter, and it's a story I grew up with. It's a story from the western part of Romania, where I am and where I grew up. So here it goes. Long time ago, so long that only the stories can remember, beneath the western mountains of Romania, there was a kingdom like no other, a kingdom of ice and snow. Everything in this kingdom was crafted or built in ice, houses, toys, jewelries. There was no day nor night in this kingdom, only the white shimmering of the snow. And this kingdom had people with hearts as cold as ice. Their hearts were frozen by their king, King Trojan, because he wanted them to be obedient to him. And he was afraid of joy and love, because love melted everything. So he had frozen the heart of everybody in his kingdom. He ruled with power and without any mercy, and with his whip. Everyone who dared to complain or disobey him would feel his whip, and with one blow he would just tear them apart. He was a rough king, but he had a daughter. He named her Snowflake because this was the most beautiful word in their kingdom, and she was the most beautiful one in the kingdom. Losing her mom at birth, Snowflake was raised by her Nana, and her Nana knew so many stories about the other kingdom, the kingdom was above the earth, the kingdom where the trees had leaves, where the flowers were colorful and perfumed, where the birds sing, and where humans had their hearts warm. They could feel love and joy. And this kingdom was ruled by King Sorin, the sun himself, a handsome young man with long golden hair, a brave young man who ruled his kingdom with warmth and love and light. Well, Nana told Snowflake many times that her father, King Trojan, hated the king of the other kingdom, King Sorin, so they should never ever whisper a word about the story, she told her. But as Snowflake grew, she grew with these stories, and inside her a longing for that other world began. And that longing grew deeper and deeper as she was growing older. And by the time she became a young lady, she longed so much to see the other world and to see that handsome, brave king that she became less smiling, quieter. And King Trojan noticed that. So one day he asked her, "Is there anything you are missing, my daughter? Are you ill? Why are you not smiling? Why are you so quiet?" "Oh, no, I have everything I want, my father, and I'm grateful for all the toys, the jewelry, the parties you are giving me. I'm fine, thank you," she said. But he wasn't convinced. So he insisted, "What's wrong? Why aren't you smiling?" So even though she knew he hated stories about the other kingdom, she thought, well, he's my father and he cares. So she dared telling him, "There is one thing, father, just one thing I'm longing so much for." "Anything, just name it," said King Trojan. "Well, I would love to go to see the other kingdom, the kingdom where the birds sing, the kingdom with the flowers, with the people with warm hearts, the kingdom where—" "Who told you those stories about the other kingdom? Who dare told you those stories?" And his voice thundered throughout the palace. Afraid for her Nana's life, Snowflake lied, and she told him, "It was the wind. The wind whispered me the stories, my father." "Oh, from now on, he's forbidden to come into my kingdom," he said. And so it was. At the only entrance between the two worlds, a guard was placed, and nobody, not even the wind, could come in or go out, because King Troyan hated the other kingdom. Well, his hate didn't stop the longing inside Snowflake. So it became bigger and stronger, and she begged her Nana, take me to the other world or I will die. Please, please, please. And she begged and she cried and she begged and she cried until Nana said, okay, even though I'm so scared and I know what the punishment will be for us, I will try to sneak you into the other kingdom just for a short time, but keep quiet. And secretly, Nana made plans. She found the white bear because they didn't have any horses down there. They were riding white bears, and she gathered as many jewelry as she could. And one day, when King Trojan was away in the other part of the kingdom, she seized the moment, took Snowflake, they mounted the back of the white bear, and they went for that entrance to get into the other world, into the other kingdom. And they rushed and they reached that gate in no time. But the soldiers were like, there is no passing through from king's orders. Yet, when they saw it was the princess who asked them, and when they saw all the jewelry she was offering them, they closed their eyes and opened the gate for just one moment. But that moment was enough for them to get out into the other world. When they came on the other side, it was night. The sky was dark with twinkling stars and with the moon shining. Snowflake had never seen night before, and the wood, the forest was asleep, and all the crickets and the owls and the wind. It was so wonderful. They were charmed. So they slowed down and they started walking through the woods, taking in all the smells and the sounds of this world they had never seen before. It was amazing. At one point, Snowflake stopped the bear and she dismounted because she wanted to touch the grass with her feet and to touch the trees and the bushes. And she went further up and further away until her nana said, stop, don't go any further. Come back, we have to rush back before your father, sees that we are missing and he will come searching for us. Come, come. One more step, Nana, one more step. And she took one more and another and another and another, and she went further away and deeper into the woods until she could no longer hear her Nana calling her. And she walked through the woods all night, exploring, taking in that new world and feeling that something inside her heart was changing, was melting, until the dawn, the first light of the dawn. And when the dawn came, King Sorin himself on his horse went up the sky, warming everything with his rays and with his light, watching over his kingdom. And from above, he saw her in the middle of the forest, and she was so beautiful. He stopped there to watch her. And then he couldn't bear any longer, and he came down with his horse, and then he dismounted and kneeled before her and took her hand and said, who are you? You are so beautiful. I am king of this world. Please accept me as your humble servant. His voice, his hair, his hand touching her melted Snowflake's heart completely, and she felt love for the first time in her life. And she fell in love with him, and he fell in love with her. And he asked her to be his bride, to go with him up into his kingdom and rule the world from up there from the sky. She told him she was Snowflake and she came from the kingdom beneath. And she said, yes, I want to be your bride, but please, please, she begged him, can we stay here in this woods, in this forest for just a bit longer? I've never heard the birds, I've never seen the flowers. Let me enjoy them for a while. He loved her so much he couldn't refuse her, So he built a house with his own hands for them both, deep hidden into the forest where they could not be found by anybody. And every morning he would go up into the sky, and every evening he will come back and spend the night with her. In the morning he will leave, in the night he'll come back and spend the night with her. And this went on and on until she became pregnant and she had their son. And he was thrilled and happy and anxious because now he was afraid to leave both of them down there into the cottage. with no protection while he was up there, running his kingdom. So he begged her again, would you come up with me, please? And she said, yes, yes, but just a little longer until the sun is, big enough to walk and run into the woods, to feel the grass, to know the animals. And he said yes again. But he was not okay. His heart was uneasy. So he left his flamey sword to Snow White, just just in case, to Snowflake, just in case there was any danger. Well, meanwhile, Nana waited for Snowflake and waited and waited. But she realized after many days and weeks that Snowflake would never come back. So she wanted to go back to that kingdom, even though she knew the punishment was waiting for her. But she was too afraid to live on the other world, on the other kingdom. She went back. As soon as she stepped into the kingdom of ice and snow, the soldiers grabbed her and thrown her to the feet of the king Troyan. Where is my daughter? He asked her. She tried to keep the secret. She wanted to keep the secret, but he tortured her. So he found out about Snowflake being away into the other kingdom. Oh, he was so angry, so furious. He took his whip and torn Nana apart in many pieces. And then he called his beast, we call them Zmei. They're like some sort of dragons, ugly, mean, evil beasts. And he sent them off to find Snowflake. Bring her to me alive. I want to punish her myself, he said. Yes, your majesty, the Zmei said, but what is in it for us? Anything, everything you want. I promise, said King Troyan. Just go and find Snowflake and bring her back to me. I want to punish her. And off they went, like a smoke, like a choky black smoke. They disappeared into the other world, and they started to search for Snowflake all over the place, until they found the tiny cottage deep into the forest. When they reached the cottage, they transformed themselves into trees and stood there for days and nights unmoved, quiet. And they watched and they listened, and they noticed that every evening King Sorin will come and stay with Snowflake and their son, and every morning he will leave. Every evening he will come, every morning he will leave. And one morning, after King Sorin left, but not before he kissed his wife and he kissed his son, and he put some flowers into Snowflake's hair, and he reminded her about the flaming sword, this beast, this May, become themselves and presented to Snowflake, telling her, we are here to fetch you. King Troyan sent us. You are to come with us. He's so angry with you. For one moment, she froze. She was so afraid, not for her own life, but for her baby's life. But then she remembered the flaming sword, and she took the sword and showed it to them. Dare to touch me, she told them. You know this sword. And yes, they knew the sword. They knew it was very powerful, so they were scared. And they changed their story. Oh, we came to fetch you not because King Troyan is angry, no, because he misses you. And he heard that he has a grandson and he wants to see his grandson. Please come with us to your father's kingdom. But Snowflake did not believe their lies. So she just stood there holding the sword into her hands. So Chief of the Zmei said, so this is the way you are treating us. Okay, Snowflake, I will see you soon enough again, and you will be sorry. And like a smoke, they went back down to the kingdom of ice to give their report to King Troyan. My daughter married to my enemy, having his son. Oh, the rage, the voice, all his kingdom shook. King Troyan was mad to hear all this news, and this time he decided he will come himself to fetch Snowflake and take her back into his kingdom and punish her. So he called his blistering winds and he mounted them, and off he went into the king of Sorin to find his daughter. By this time, realizing that her father has found her, Snowflake decided to run away. She took her baby into her arms and ran off deeper into the woods, higher and higher into the mountains, hoping for the day to end so that Sorin would come down from the sky and protect them. But you cannot run really fast with a baby in your arms, stopping now and then to feed him. So one time, when she stopped to feed her baby by a tree, she fell asleep And in her dream, she dreamt about the other kingdom, the kingdom of ice. And she felt the chills and the cold. And she woke up, and there in front of her was her father, King Trojan. I found you, Snowflake, and now you'll come with me and feel my anger, he told her. She still had, the flaming sword with her. But her human heart now wouldn't allow her to kill her father. So instead of taking the sword and fighting, she begged him, please, father, I'm begging you, have mercy, if not on me, on your grandson. He is your grandson. I don't have no mercy with no one, King Trojan said. He will suffer the same punishment you will. For me, he's not my grandson. He's the son of my enemy. And he tried to reach to pull her by her hair. Then she decided she has to defend her son. And she tried to reach for her sword. But one of the snakes became a snake and bit her hand, who just fell dead, motionless. She couldn't move her hand. She tried to reach her sword with the other hand, but was again bitten. And she couldn't use her hands to defend herself or her child. And then she threw herself over her child, trying to protect him with her own body and begging for mercy. There is no such thing as mercy, King Trojan said, and pulled her by the hair and dragged her down to his kingdom. But before he left, the chief of the Zmei asked him, Majesty, how about our reward? Yes, tell me what you want, anything, King Trojan said. Well, I want her, I want Snowflake to be my wife, said the chief of the dragons. No, you cannot have her, anything but her, said King Trojan. The dragons were not pleased with this. Well then, give us her son, they asked. Yeah, you may have him. Do whatever you want with him, said King Trojan, and pulling Snowflake by her hair, he went down to his kingdom. The dragons took the baby and flew with him over the woods, and when they saw down there a pack of hungry wolves, they threw the child. Yes, King Sorin's child will be eaten by wolves. They were happy, but they had no reward. So they thought, let's go back and fetch that sword. Maybe that flaming sword could be our weapon. And they went back and tried to pick up that sword, but it was so heavy, they couldn't move it. So they went back to the kingdom of ice, frustrated, furious with King Trojan, and with their no reward. While dragging Snowflake by her hair, King Trojan took her deep and deeper down to the lowest dungeon of his palace. And there he chained her and told her, you will stay here and die here. You will never see your son or your husband again. And ignoring her crying, ignoring her tears, he went up to his chambers. But he wasn't aware that from her hair, as she's been dragging on, the flowers fell on, and the people in the Ice Kingdom saw the flowers, picked them up and smelled them, touched them, and the flowers went from one hand to another. And as they were smelling the flowers, seeing the beauty and touching the softness of the flowers, their hearts began to melt, and they began to feel mercy, and they began to ask for mercy for Snowflake, and they began to ask to go to the other world. They wanted to see more flowers, and their voices grew louder and louder and louder until the rumor reached the palace and king's rooms. And he came out and see the rebellion, and he was even more furious. How dare you ask for mercy for Snowflake? He betrayed me. How dare you rebel against me? I will kill you all. I will kill you all under snow, and I will fetch new servants, he said. And he did. He called the blistering winds and the snow starting to fall, heaps and heaps of snow on top of all his servants, even though he could still hear their voices crying. Over all that rumor, he heard a voice he knew so well. It was the voice of his own daughter crying down in the dungeons. Tată, tată, dragă, nu-ți fie de șagă, că aici sub pământ mi-ai zidit mormânt, dar nici un mormânt liniște nu simt, că mi-e dor de-al meu pruncușor, de-al meu soțior, mi-e dor de viață, de flori și verdeață. And her crying made him so angry, so furious. He called for more snow and more snow. And as his servants were killed, drowning under the snow, he could see from there Above the place where his daughter was in the dungeon, crying hot tears, a steam coming out as the ice and the snow was melting from her tears, and the steam grew thicker and thicker, and soon enough the snow and the ice was melting and melting, and they transformed into water, and his columns of his palace were shaking, and he was shaking and afraid. He called for the maid to come and save him, but he didn't come because they were not pleased with his reward, and he died there, drowned into that water together with his servants and with Snowflake. But that huge pool of water searched for a way out from underneath the mountain and found the entrance. And it came out like a bubbling spring, a spring that was still whispering the words of Snowflake. In this time, Sorin came from the sky and he saw his cottage empty. He was searching around for his wife and his son. He couldn't find them. And as he was searching, he saw the Smay coming from the entrance, trying to, escape to reach for their lives. And he caught them and he found all the story from their mouth as King Troyan came and found Snowflake, and as they died, drowned into that water, and how his son was fed to the wolves. And he was so sad. He put the Smay into a dungeon under the protection of a very trusty person he had, and then he went into the woods crying and mourning for his wife and his son, until he reached that spring, and he tried to drink some clear crystal water, but he could hear the water whispering the voice of his beloved wife. And he was so sad, he didn't want it to go up again. He didn't want it to warm the world with his warmth. And so, said the story, was the first winter ever that came into the world, because sun refused to go up because he was mourning for his wife. After a long time of mourning, he wiped his tears and went back again to the sky, and the spring came and the summer. But now and then, King Sorin would get down from the sky and mourn for his wife, and then the winter would come again over the land of the humans. He was still searching for his son. Maybe he found him, maybe he not. But that's another story for another time. Thank you.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, I suppose I ought to tell a story now.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Oh, that was a really incredible story.
Thank you, Bob.
Wonderful story for the season.
Yeah.
Well,
the trouble with listening to other people's stories, you forget the ones you were going to tell yourself.
Oh.
But it's okay, because I was reminded. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm always doing this. I come where I think I'm going to tell a particular story, and then I'm reminded of a story by the story that's gone before. And I was reminded, this is a story from the Sami, the people who live in Lapland. And many tourists go to Lapland this time of year, of course, to see the Northern Lights. The best months for seeing them is October, but they tend to go at Christmas because they can see that fella with the red costume and a big white beard and Northern Lights at the same time. And this is a story about the Northern Lights. And it's from way back in time when my hair was dark and my beard was ginger and all my teeth were my own. Possibly even older than that. And the moon had a daughter. And she was called, well, we will call her Moon Girl. And the sun had a son. And we shall call him Sun Boy. Now, Moon Girl was beautiful. She had silver hair. She had skin the color of cloudberries. And when the sun saw her, he thought, this girl will make a wife for my son. And he went to his son and he said, you're going to marry Moon Girl. Go away. Go and woo her. Go and court her. Well, some boy wasn't that happy because, you know, you don't always want your parents to choose your partner for you. But he went and, well, actually, as soon as he saw her, he fell in love straight away. You're beautiful. You are the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in all of my life. And he took off his golden slippers and he handed them to her as a gift. And she took those golden slippers. Ow! They burnt her hand. She threw them back at some boy. She ran back to her mother. And she told her mother what had happened. Well, mother thought, well, we're going to be in trouble. We've just turned down the son for marriage. I'm going to have to hide you. And she took her, and she found a deserted place, and she made a cotta, goatee. It's like a teepee, like a pointed tent, and she put Moon Girl in, and she made a blanket. She covered the entrance so the light couldn't go. And she lived there safely for quite a while. And in those days, time passed and you couldn't tell whether it was 1 year or 10 years or 100 years or even a millennium. But one day, flying across the sky, came Northern Lights with his brothers. And he looked down and he saw the little cot. And he said, come out to whoever is in there. If you're older than me, you are my mother. If you are younger than me, if you are the same age as me, you are my sister. If you're younger than me, you will be my bride. Well, Northern Lights had one of those mischievous voices, full of charm. And Moon Girl couldn't resist. She came out and, well, he came down and they were married and they lived together in that cot. But the trouble with playful boys, and he was a playful boy, is that they will go out and play. So every night, Northern Lights left the cotta and went and played with his brothers amongst the stars. Every morning he'd come home. But boys may be playful, but women are wise. So one night when he was out, she made a blanket for the ceiling. And she wove into it all the stars of the sky. When he came back in the morning and went to sleep, he slept all day. But when he woke up, he thought he was already among the stars. Well, he was happy, she was happy, and they lived happily for year upon year upon year. Till one day, just as the great bear was pulling the moon across the sky path and the sun was coming up, Northern Lights had left the entrance to the cotta just a little bit open, just a tad. And the light of Moon Girl shone out. And the sun saw, and the sun came down, and he grabbed her and he pulled her out. And Northern Lights saw what was happening. And he came and he grabbed Sun, and Sun pushed him away. And the sun says to Moon Girl, you will marry my boy. Now, boy, come here. And the sun boy came. But Moon Girl looked at him and said, I will never marry you. I hate you. Although the sun was angry, he realized there was absolutely nothing he could do. The Moon Girl ran back to her mother because that was the only safe place, because the sun might be angry one moment, quiet the next. He could never quite be trusted. So Moon Girl still lives up there in the moon with her mother. And sometimes, if you look out at night, if you're very lucky, and I have been lucky a few times when I've been in that place, you can see northern lights crossing the sky. And you can see Moon Girl looking out. They're apart, but they will love each other for eternity. That was a little story from
Thank you.
that's a little story from the Sami. But I think we'll come further south to the, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the name of this forest. And if there's anyone from Sweden listening, I apologize, but this is, but I haven't got anyone I can ask. I think it's the Going forest. It's the forest, the Going forest in the south of Sweden. It's a very interesting area because it was where, at some point, about 1700s, I think it was where there was a rebels lived there. It was one of those places that almost had a guerrilla army there, and which would make sense of this story, because this story is of the Christmas Rose, and Robber Mother lived up in the mountains with Robber Father and her brood of children. I mean, you can imagine what they were like. Robber Mother and Robber Father, what sort of children? They'd have wild children, and these children were wild, and they lived in the forest. But Robber Mother used to come down to the town occasionally with her children, begging, door to door, house to house. And everyone was frightened of her. No one dared drive her away, because they knew if she was driven away or if she was insulted in any way, Robber Father would come down and wreak havoc upon the town. And she'd gone with her children, who were screaming and playing in the street. And she'd gone from house to house till she came to a cloister, like a monastery where monks live. And she knocked on the door, and she was given a plate full of cakes. But the children, well, they had been told to stand still, but they were sort of children who didn't know how to stand still. It was, I don't think they'd ever stood still in their lives. So even when they were sleeping, they were tossing and turning. And they'd found a little wicker gate at the side of the cloister, and they'd forced it open the way only children who are determined to get into somewhere can force open a gate. And they looked inside, and then they came and they grabbed their mother's skirts and, mother, come and look at this. Oh, and she went inside the gate, and there inside was the most beautiful herb garden, a herb garden like you've never seen in all of your life. And there was a young monk tending it. Now, the herb garden was the pride and joy of the abbot, Abbot Hans. The thing he loved almost as much as praying was looking after his herbs. And the young monk looked up, and he saw Robber Mother and her children running around. The children were running around the herb garden, and Robber Mother was admiring it. He said, "Woman, woman, no woman is allowed in here. Get out now and take those scruffy children with you." Do you think she took any notice? No, she just stood firm and quite calm. So he called for help, and 2 stout monks came out with sticks, and Robber Mother still stood firm. And then she started shrieking, and she shrieked louder and louder and louder till the old abbot himself came out. And he looked at Robber Mother, and he looked at the monks threatening her. He said, "Shame on you all, threatening this old woman like that. You go inside." So it was just the abbot himself and the young monk. Now, Robber Mother, of course, was still looking daggers at the abbot. She expected to be told off, but the abbot spoke sweetly and calmly. He said, "I see you're admiring my herb garden. Did you ever see a garden as beautiful as this?" And she's about to say no when she remembers something that happens in the forest every year. She said, "I don't mean to judge, but if you saw what happened in the forest, what happens every Christmas Eve, and the beautiful garden that grows through the snow on Christmas Eve every year, you would pull up every herb in this garden and throw it away like it was weeds." He was really surprised. It wasn't the answer he expected. But he had heard of the Christmas Eve garden up in the forest. And he thought it was only a legend, but, well, she said, if you can show me this forest, if you can show me this garden, well, I'll reward you, Robber Father. Well, she went off and went back to the cave where they lived up in the forest. And the old abbot, he didn't say anything to anyone until the Archbishop came. The Archbishop Absalon. And in those days, the church was incredibly powerful. The church were the police, the government, and everything. And they had power to pardon, and they had power to have people put in prison. And the abbot said to the Archbishop, he said, I'd love to see this garden. And if I'm shown it, can we have a pardon for Robber Father and his family so they can come and live down in the town? Well, there are people who don't believe anyone can be reformed. And the Archbishop was one of those. No, a criminal is always a criminal. I don't want them down. They're outlaws. They can live in the forest. I don't want them down here in the town. No one will be safe. But the abbot was persistent. He said, "No, if I can prove it." "Well, if you can bring me one flower from that Christmas garden, I will write a letter of pardon for Robber Father." Well, Robber Mother she didn't really want to tell anyone where the garden was, but on the other hand, she was so proud of it, and she wanted the abbot to believe in it. So she sent a message down with one of the children that he could come, but we could only bring one person with him. And the abbot brought the young monk. And they walked through the town, and the abbot didn't go out often. And he saw it's a bit like now. If you walk through the town, people have got their lights up. I see Ina has got her golden decorations behind her, and beautiful golden strip across. And it was like every house was like that. And there were people roasting their big Sunday Christmas roasts and on the fires, and everyone was singing carols. And the old abbot was really happy. He'd never seen, he hadn't walked through such joyful place for years and years. And then he got to the forest, and it got harder. And they took horses to ride up into the forest, till they eventually came to the cave. Well, Robber Mother was there, as proud as any housewife, standing in the doorway. Come in, she said, and bring the horses too, but they'll freeze to death out there. Sit down by the fire. Well, there you go. Go to sleep. You can sleep. I'll watch. I'll call you when the garden starts. When you won't miss it. Well, the children, all the children were asleep. The young monk went to sleep. Robber Father sat with his back to them, refusing to have anything. But he heard Robber Mother and the old abbot talking, and they talked and talked. And when he heard about the pardon, he said, I don't believe a word of it, but if a pardon does come, I promise I will move the town. I won't steal so much as one goose. Right, now you two be quiet. We'll miss the guy. I can hear. Just then the bells started ringing. And there wasn't a church anywhere near, and there were just bells ringing in the forest. Quick, wake up, wake up. Well, they all went out. And coming through the snow, well, first one shoot, then another, then the most beautiful flowers. And then the animals. So fox came out of its hole with its cubs with their little black legs. And there were squirrels, and there were birds flying round. And there were wild strawberries. Now, I don't know how many of you have had wild strawberries, but they are beautiful. I know you have, Ina. There's actually the last time I had wild strawberries was Romania, and there were raspberries, and I mean, the children were running around filling their mouths. There was even a black bear came up and sort of started scrabbling around there. Robber Father's patch, but normally, it's not quite safe to stand around when bears are around. So you run, or you've got about a dozen dogs around you to drive it off. But in this case, Robber Father just stared at the bear and said, just go over there and find your own place. And the bear turned round and padded off and found its own berries to eat. And the abbot, he was trying to choose which flower to pick. But every time he saw one, he was about to pick it when another more beautiful flower came through. Now, I could carry on describing this garden, but really, I'm looking at the time, and well, I'd still be telling this story tomorrow when the storytelling teachers from around the world come on at 6 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time tomorrow. But so suffice it is an incredibly beautiful garden, and the abbot is picking and not picking, and well, just kept changing his mind when a dove landed on his shoulder, and he could feel the angels around, and their wings were nearly touching. was in a state of ecstasy. But the young monk, he thought this was the work of the devil. Why should these criminals be shown anything so beautiful? It can't possibly be holy. But the abbot is there. He can feel the angel. And the dove on his shoulder. And the young monk saw the dove on the old abbot's shoulder and thought it was the work of the devil himself. And he struck the dove and said, "Go back to where you came from." And with that, the garden began to wither. And the old abbot fell to his knees. "I nearly had the angels touching me." And then he remembered his promise. And he's scrabbling round in the snow. Everyone went back to the cave. But when they got back to the cave, they realized the abbot was missing. Hadn't followed. And they went. And they found him frozen in the snow. His hands clenched. They took his body back down the mountain. And when they unclenched his hands, there were 2 bulbs in the hand. And the young monk planted them in his garden. And the next Christmas, a solitary rose grew in the garden. And it had the most beautiful bloom. And the young monk remembered the abbot's promise. And he took that flower and he gave it to the archbishop, and the archbishop remembered the promise and wrote a letter of pardon to Robber Father. And the young monk took it up and gave Robber Father the letter. Robber Father and Robber Mother were still angry at the young monk because obviously the next year the garden hadn't grown, and it didn't any year after that. But Robber Father and his family came down to town, and to tell you the truth, he didn't steal so much as one goose. And they lived a respectable life. And as for the young monk, he spent the rest of his life in the cave as a penance and looking at the beauty of that forest, although it never again had the Christmas garden. So that was a couple of winter tales. And, I just it's great this time of year. I love that, and so we've got the solstice going on, and we've got Christmas going on. We've got all sorts of things going on. Everyone seems to have midwinter celebration. Well, everyone in the northern hemisphere seems to have midwinter celebration. You scrape into the northern hemisphere, Bob. It goes down to about just, so the sand doesn't quite burn your feet where Bob is in New Mexico.
We had snow the other day, John. We're not that far. We're not that far south.
Okay. Yeah, Ali's still waiting for snow. Yeah. When did it last snow in Marrakesh?
Yeah. Your story of the Northern Lights just brought back vividly for me the time I used to live in Fairbanks, Alaska, and in the winter, one day in particular, the full moon comes up just as the sun is setting, and on that particular evening, The sun was setting, the full moon was coming up, and the aurora borealis was just dancing in the sky all at the same time.
Wow.
It was one of the most marvelous celestial things I've ever seen.
I've only ever seen the red northern lights, which is the rarer one, once, and it was my first day actually. About when I'd been picked up in Norway to go to work and been taken across to Finland, and on the Northern Lights route, and we looked out in the out the window, and they were red Northern Lights. And I've been season after season hoping to see them again. I've seen green ones. They're beautiful, but it doesn't matter red or green. They're incredibly beautiful, and yeah, there's your story. You know, just had so much that sort of the winter summer. You know, that changeover as a folk explanation for winter and summer. There's a yeah. It's a bit beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
You've made an incredibly full evening.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. It's important. It's important that tellers enjoy it. So,
yes. And thank you for your stories.
Yeah, and I will get to Romania. We will see each other eventually when travel returns again, and I go and see my house in Romania.
Yes, please. I would love to see you here.
All right, but for now, thank you very much. Thank you, Ina Bulzan. Thank you those that came to us, Bob and Abdu. Abdu, good to see you. And Ali, tomorrow night is as I mentioned, is David Heathfield is introducing storytelling teachers from around the world. A lot of the storytelling teachers have been working with. And then on Tuesday rather, is at 5 o'clock, an hour earlier, are our young tellers, and they really inspire me with young tellers from Gaza and other places. And it's with Gaza and India last week. It was it's always a pleasure. But right now, it's been a pleasure telling stories and listening to stories. So from the World Storytelling Cafe, good night. And if you want to drop a little in the old man's hat.
Thank you.
We like that.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.
Bye, John. Bye.
Thank you, Ali.
Bye, Ali.
Thank you, Abdu.
Thank you, John. Bye. Good night.
Right.